made this video maybe a year or two ago. It was off some information that I saw on NASA. First of all, they swallow the fluoride. You know, these are very, very monitored people. There's water floating around everywhere in a place that's not earthed, and she's swallowing fluoride, which isn't very good for you. It actually says on the toothpaste, don't swallow it. When this shuttle takes off, not only is the globe supposed to be rotating, they're also going, well, I suppose they could be flying with the rotation, but they're still going at an enormous speed. When we are told that the ISS space station is only a couple of 100 miles away, if you've got to get, this is reading 6,000, but this thing gets up to 8,000 miles an hour. 8,000 miles an hour! Think about it. Even if you've got to get into some kind of trajectory, and the fact that they, what is it, how many times do they go around the Earth? I've actually forgotten. It's something like, they go around the Earth 17 times a day, right? So, within a very short period of time, doing this speed with everything else, they would have actually have hit the ISS space station. Now, I'm going to play this video and I hope you enjoy. Also, we've got the same problems as in the other case. Do you see that they're travelling? Do you see? They're travelling at 6,000 miles an hour, and yet the water is moving as if they're not moving at all. Anyway, we will get onto this, and there's loads of other little goodies in this video. So I hope you see that this looks just like the Watts case and all the other cases. There's something wrong. There's something very wrong with what we're watching. Oh dear, I have been looking at NASA again, and I'm sorry. Just a simple person like me can see that there are a million problems. So I've gone through some of this footage and I have slowed some of it down, and I've added bits that I've already put on Sun and Moon. I just cannot believe that this place is allowed to keep going and lying to us. It's just ridiculous. Why can't someone a bit more influential be looking at these videos and looking at the footage, looking at it all? Because it's just obvious to the layperson like me that there's something very, very wrong.
We actually live in space like normal, like at home. I mentioned real quickly about getting up in the morning and brushing your teeth and washing your face. Sticks to your toothbrush, too. If you can see it, I'll have some water come out. Water is pretty neat up in space. It'll stick to your toothbrush and it will make some water come out. Water is pretty neat up in space. It'll stick to your two options. Swallow it, and it's sort of like mouthwash, but it tastes a little gross. Mouthwash, but it tastes a little gross.
When a plane hits the speed of sound, it has this bloom around it, right? And that's when this plane was hitting the speed of sound. That's what happens, okay? then basically there is a speed, roughly, but it will depend on the height. You know, the higher you go, it does change a bit to the lower you are to the sea. But at 767 miles an hour, this is what happens when people on a ship are watching an aircraft is watching a plane hitting the speed of sound. So how come when we're only 5 seconds into this takeoff and this rocket is doing 900 miles an hour, there's no plume, no sound of breaking the speed, nothing. Watch for yourself.
5 seconds into the flight, all systems operating normally, 900 miles an hour. The speed of Atlantis right now, 6 miles in altitude, 9 miles downrange.
Atlantis, go with throttle up.
Copy, go with throttle up.
The throttle up call acknowledged by Commander Charlie Hobaugh, joined on the flight deck by pilot Butch Wilmore, flight engineer Randy Bresnick and Leland Melvin. Seated down on the middeck are Mike Foreman and Bobby Satcher, kicking off their work week with a Monday commute to orbit. 1 minute, 30 seconds into the flight, Atlantis 13 miles in altitude, 15 miles downrange, traveling almost 2,000 miles an hour. Three good auxiliary power units, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good main engines. One minute, 50 seconds into the flight, 10 seconds away from solid rocket booster separation. Booster officer confirms staging a good solid rocket booster separation. Guidance now converging. Atlantis steering into the center lane of Highway 129 en route to the International Space Station. 2 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight, 34 miles in altitude, 48 miles downrange. Atlantis traveling 3,200 miles an hour. Propulsion officer and mission control reports that the orbital maneuvering system engines have ignited. Atlantis kicking on the afterburners.
Copy, engine down.
Atlantis flying on the singular power of its 3 liquid fuel main engines, draining about 1/2 ton of fuel per second from the large fuel tank. Coming up on the 3-minute mark into the flight, Atlantis 46 miles in altitude, 81 miles downrange, traveling almost 4,000 miles an hour. Atlantis speeding straight as an arrow toward its date with the International Space Station Wednesday morning. 3.5 minutes into the flight, all of Atlantis' systems functioning by the book. 55 miles in altitude, 120 miles downrange, traveling almost 5,000 miles an hour.
Atlantis, negative return.
Atlantis copies, negative return.
Atlantis now too far downrange, too high in altitude to return to the launch site in the event of an engine failure. All 3 engines performing perfectly. Four minutes, 20 seconds into the flight, Atlantis now 62 miles in altitude, 180 miles downrange, traveling almost 6,000 miles an hour. All systems performing normally. Atlantis on course, on track for its preliminary orbit.
Copy, ATO.
That call up from Capcom Chris Ferguson indicating that Atlantis can now make minimal orbital altitude targets in the event of an engine failure. However, all three engines continue to perform normally, as do the auxiliary power units and the three power-producing fuel cells. 5.5 minutes into the flight, Atlantis now 67 miles in altitude, 312 miles downrange, traveling almost 8,000 miles an hour.
Estimate single engines cost for 104.
That call from Capcom Chris Ferguson to Commander Charlie Hobaugh indicating that Atlantis can make normal orbital cutoff targets in the event of an engine failure.
You will meet in the post on Swan.
And we'll see you there, Scorch.
You will meet in the post on Swan.
And we'll see you there, Scorch.